On behalf of the Ministry of Legal Affairs, I want to welcome you to this public consultation on the important subject of the Grenada Constitution. As we are aware, the Constitution is the supreme law of the land, and it has been with us for over 40 years. And a lot of talk has been and efforts have been made. Read the review of the Grenada Constitution, and this evening the process continues. It gives me great pleasure to turn you over to the chairman for the evening, Mr. Branch.
Thank you very much, Mr. Andel, President of the St.Patrick Development Organization. Honorable Clifton Paul, Parliamentary Representative for the constituency. Former Prime Minister of Grenada, Mr. Tillman Thomas. Ms. Naisha Jordan, representative of the Conference of Churches. Ladies and gentlemen of St. Patrick, it is my pleasure to be here this evening to be part of this consultation and to share some ideas with you regarding the reform of the Grenada Constitution. The Grenada Constitution is, as it proclaims itself in section 106, is the supreme law of Grenada. And essentially it is not a very big document. This is what it looks like. Not an essentially large document. And so many people have the misconception that everything is in the Constitution, but essentially it is the fundamental law, and every other law that is made by the Parliament has to be consistent with this Constitution. And it is important to define or to say something about the Constitution. What is it? And it can be defined ordinarily as it's a document that contains the fundamental legal instruments of this country, and it contains the foundations of our government. It's the governing principles. And this Constitution was given to us or handed to us in 1974 when we attained independence. So what we are trying to do now is to change it and to make it truly Grenadian, so that every Grenadian can identify and can say at the end of the process that they had something to do with it, because essentially it was given to us. Now there are three what we can regard as distinct phases of constitutional reform in Grenada since independence. The first of which was in 1985, when the new National Party government was headed then by the late Robert Augustus Blaise, appointed a Constitutional Review Commission in February of 1985. And that committee went around Grenada, hosting consultations, getting ideas from people, and gave a report in November of 1985. But nothing was really done, or no action was taken to move the process forward. And then several years later, in 2002, it was the new National Party government again, this time headed by Dr. Keith Mitchell, appointed a Constitutional Review Commission, and that commission had several consultations and gave a report in 2006. But since then, of course, nothing was done to act on the recommendations of that commission. And in 2010, it was the National Democratic Government, headed then by former Prime Minister Tillman Thomas, who is here with us tonight at the head table, on the 3rd of December 2010, launched another phase of constitutional reform. And at that time, what happened was the late Professor Simeon McIntosh was authorized to do a new draft constitution for Grenada. But what he did is that draft constitution wasn't plucked from thin air. It wasn't based on his own imagination of how he perceived it. It reflected some of his thinking. But the reports of the two prior commissions, the 1985 and the 2006 review commissions formed the basis or the foundation for his new draft constitution. So he took a lot of what was said in the reports of those two commissions. And the NDC government then decided that this new process of constitution reform would be led out of the Attorney General's chambers in the Ministry of Legal Affairs. The thinking is that then the Attorney General was then Mr. Rohan Philip, was a public officer, not a politician. And I was at that time Registrar of the Supreme Court. The government, I was transferred and asked to come over to the Ministry of Legal Affairs to be the coordinator for this project. So I'm saying all of this so that you understand that this is a very unique project, which we titled the Grenada Constitution Review Project. It is non-political, non-partisan. And what we're doing here tonight is a continuation of what was started many, many years ago. So it is important that people of this area understand that this process is non-political, non-partisan. Now, from 2010 until 2012, 2013, we had several consultations. It was basically Professor McIntosh and myself traveling throughout Grenada, visiting schools, communities, and getting views on the Constitution. And what we saw emerging was that an emerging consensus by the two political parties in terms of the way forward. And we realized that we had a good thing going in that there was no major disagreements, so essentially no disagreements between the two parties in any major way. And what the Ministry of Legal Affairs sought to do was that while we reported to government, we also ensured that the opposition was informed at the same time in terms of what was going on. So that when elections were held in 2013, the new government already knew what was going on. It was no secret. We were sharing all of the findings with them, so that immediately the new government moved to continue the process of constitutional reform. And that's why we're here. And an important element of moving forward is the formation of what we call a Constitution Reform Advisory Committee. Now, this committee is made up of several members. And tonight we have some members of the committee here. It's a 14-member committee. We're pleased to have Sir Tillman Thomas, former Prime Minister of Grenada and former Minister of Legal Affairs. And I said the process started during the leadership when he led the country as Prime Minister. And he represents the NDC, on the committee. And it shows the involvement of the opposition in this process. Ms. Naisha John represents the Grenada Conference of Churches. And if I should refresh my notes to let you know who the other members of the committee are, we have Senator Simon Steele, who isn't here with us tonight. Usually he's present at these meetings, and he represents the New National Party. Dr. Francis Alexis, who's a former minister and former Attorney General, is also a former leader of the PLM. He's an expert in constitutional law. He's the chairperson and is lead consultant on this project. We have Mr. Bud Patterson, who represents the Trade Union Council. They're represented on the advisory committee as well. Ms. Margaret Wilkinson is a representative of the Grenada Chamber of Industry and Commerce. Dr. Lawrence Joseph, President of the Senate. He represents the Grenada Bar Association. We have Mr. Norman Gilbert, who represents the youth on the committee. Ms. Sheriam Noel represents the Grenada Media Workers Association, because we have the media involved so that they not only report on it, but they're part of the process as well. I seem to have Ms. Sandra Ferguson, represents the Interagency Grouping of Development Organizations. And we have Ms. Kindred Maturin, who represents Carrico and P.T. Of course, Carrico has special interests in this process of constitutional reform, respecting local government and the issue of the proposed change in the name of the state. Now, the purpose of the advisory committee is to provide oversight of the process so as to ensure that it is transparent and credible. So although the government has sanctioned it and the government is putting money, it continues, You'll notice that the committee is wide-ranging, represents several sectoral interests, and persons who are independent, fiercely independent. You know, Mr. Thomas representing the opposition, the churches represented, the unions. And so this committee meets every week. We work very hard to guide the process and to ensure that at the end of the day we can recommend to government the way forward regarding constitutional reform. We've divided the island into two zones, the eastern zone and the western zone. So tonight the team that's here is responsible for handling the consultations on the eastern zone. St. Patrick's is the northern zone. We have a team that is in St. George's right now holding consultations at Dr. Alexis, who heads the committee, is in another consultation at the Public Workers Union. He should be on his way up. We expect him to join us. Now, the purpose of all of this, at the end of the day, the intention, as I said, change this constitution. And these consultations are important, are fundamental, because this constitution is the only law of this land that, apart from the government wanting to change it or having the authority to change it, it needs the input of the people in a serious manner. Now, as you know, there's our parliamentary structure that we have, the House of Representatives, that's made up of 15 elected members, and we have the Senate, that's made up of nominated members. And they pass laws. The government wants to pass any law, it goes ahead, drafts a bill, and they will debate it in the House of Representatives. And once it's passed, it goes to the Senate and it's debated, and it becomes law. But this constitution, because of the entrenched provisions in this constitution, can only be changed, firstly, by a two-thirds vote in the House of Representatives and in a two-thirds vote in the Senate. But after that, there has to be a referendum. And essentially, a referendum is a process where every Grenadian who is eligible to vote in a general election has to come and participate in a vote on this constitution. So the process that we went through in 2013 to change the government, to have a new government, is necessary to change this constitution. So that's why we're consulting with you, so that we can have your input, your buy-in. And this process, of course, has to be distinguished from the process when we first got the constitution, when there was no debate. Not even in the House of Representatives or in the Senate was there any debate. And the people had no chance, no opportunity to ratify this constitution. So you have to bear that in mind. At the end of this process, there has to be a referendum. What is peculiar about this referendum, though, is that it is no other, is that two-thirds of the people voting in this referendum, in order for any change to be effected, have to vote in favor of the referendum. So that's 66%. And that's a very high threshold. You'd, of course, be familiar with the process in St. Vincent and the Grenadines several years ago, when they went to a referendum, and that referendum wasn't successful. And we hope that in Grenada that this wouldn't happen, that the referendum will be successful. And I want to touch on that a bit in terms of the process and how we're proceeding. Because there are two differences, main differences, between the process in Grenada and the process in St. Vincent. And one is that we have an advisory committee that's guiding the process. And the thinking of the government and the opposition and the other parties is that we want to, whatever issues that we decide on at the end of the day, that there is consensus. There has to be consensus. So that we go forward united, one people, changing this document. Because it is important to know that even in the national party in our government now, having won twice, all 15 seats, never got 66% of the vote in the general election. So we have to be reminded of that. And the government has advised, our conversations with the minister and the prime minister, they've said that we would not want to go forward with anything that there's no consensus on. And that is why immediately before the last general election, there was an emerging consensus, as I've said, in the Ministry of Legal Affairs that had drafted a resolution. the government and opposition hadn't signed it or debated it, but there was an understanding that whoever won the general election in 2013, that within 1 year we would have a referendum on the constitution. So that's why we're here now. So this has to be emphasized that it's not an NMP issue, an NDC issue, a church issue, etc., but it's fundamental to every Grenadian. Now I just want to touch on briefly some of the issues that we're going to consider in the referendum that are going to be debated. So the other speakers would speak to it, some of them a bit more. But one issue, for example, is regards the position of Her Majesty the Queen and our relationship with Grenada. As you know, she is our head of state, represented by a Governor General. Do we want to continue with that relationship? Or do we want to have a president, a Grenadian citizen of Grenada, as our head of state? That is one issue that is being considered and is being debated. And it will be for you, the people of Grenada, to decide whether you want to make that change. There's also the issue of the change in the name of the state of Grenada. That is an especially important issue for the people of Carrick and St.Patrick. So far, we've been hearing mixed views on that issue. The people of Carrick and St.Patrick have been saying to us, based on the consultations we've had in Carrick and St.Patrick before, that the name of the state should include Carrick and St.Patrick, because they feel that we're divided by water, and they feel far removed, and they would like to become more engaged in Grenada and what happens here. They feel left out, that everything happens in Grenada, and so that's very important to them. And it's an issue that the people of Grenada will have to decide on, if the committee essentially decides that that's an issue that will go forward. The whole issue of the structure of Parliament. As you're aware, our system now comprises 2 houses. There's the House of Representatives, and then there's the Senate. Do we want to continue having a bicameral system, or should we have a unicameral system, which it has been argued is cheaper? That's another issue that you have to decide, that we'll have to consider. Another issue is the whole issue of first past the post system. There's a general election, 15 seats, whichever party wins its government and appoints the Senate. The winner takes all. And there's an emerging argument that system may not be the most appropriate for democracy, because now there's one party won 15 seats, overwhelming majority. So there is no opposition in the House of Representatives. When the debate occurs and the Prime Minister presents it, the NMP debate among themselves. The NDC isn't present to do that. So Senator Bock, who's the NDC spokesman on finance, isn't there to challenge the Prime Minister. Is that proper? And there's the fact that the NMP got 60% of the vote, popular vote. The NDC got 40%. Should they have a voice in the lower house, in the House of Representatives? So that's an issue that's emerging. And both parties have been making suggestions that possibly that needs to change. The people of Grenada never had a chance to decide on that or make any contribution in 1974 when the Constitution was written. Probably it wasn't conceived that one party would win all seats, not once, twice. So that's very important. But the people of Grenada will have a chance to decide on that if this issue goes forward. Well, you'll have a chance for questions. Just let me continue. So that's one issue. Then there's the whole issue of whether we should have an electoral commission dealing with our elections. Another important issue has to do with the Privy Council versus the Caribbean Court of Justice. As you're aware, our final appellate court is the Privy Council that's based in London. It's far removed. Only 2 cases, sometimes 1, civil cases, go to the Privy Council every year. I'm not sure how many of you understand that. And it's very expensive. And if you don't have at least $100,000 or more, you can't even think of going to the Privy Council. So is it then a case where do the people of Grenada have access to justice at that level if they feel dissatisfied with the judgment at the level of the Court of Appeal? So that's another issue that we'll have to consider. So it is important then that you listen to the presentations that are being made, that you ask questions, and view the process as non-political, non-partisan. There have been other issues that have been emerging as well in terms of the reform process. And although there have been, as I said, 2 prior commissions that went around Grenada, listening to the people, making presentations, from 2006 to now, or 2010 to now, there have been changes. There's an emerging issue regarding human rights and the whole issue of the rights of gays and lesbians, and whether there's protection for that in the Constitution. What is our position on that? And before anyone asks that question, this issue has not necessarily raised itself in prior consultations in any extensive way. Even in when Professor McIntosh and I were going around the island, we had a few people asking, but now it's an emerging issue. There are people who are making overtures to the office and saying, well, we want to debate this issue. We suspect that the churches may have a different view on this issue, but it's an issue which wasn't relevant before, and we have to consider now, because the world is changing, has changed. And that's the reality. And the Constitution protects everyone. So it's something that we may have to discuss. And your view is important in this issue too. And that's why we have to listen to the people, because the country probably may or may not be at a position where that's an issue that we may want to change at the moment. So at this time, I'd like to invite, we have 2 other speakers at present. As I said, Dr. Francis Alexis is expected to be on his way. I'd like to invite Ms. Naisha John, who represents the Conference of Churches.
I represent the Conference of Churches in Grenada. I am not part of the clergy. I am a lay member of the Conference of Churches, and I am a Presbyterian representative on the Conference of Churches in Grenada. So I just wanted to let you know that I'm not clergy, but I do represent the interests of the Conference of Churches in Grenada. And for us, the movement for constitutional reform is a very important one. The conference is very pleased to be part of the process of constitutional reform. We see the process as being one where every citizen has the opportunity to express their view, and in a non-confrontational manner, in a manner in which their rights can be heard and their rights can be preserved. So the Conference of Churches is very interested in this process. The conference has, in the past, in its inception, have been at the forefront of change and in development of the people of Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique. Before I go a little further, I would just like to say the members, the constitution of the Conference of Churches in Grenada. It is made up of the Catholics, Anglicans, Presbyterians, Methodists, and the Salvation Army at present. We would have had the Seventh-day Adventists and the Baptists, spiritual Baptists, having observer status. I think it was probably a year ago that they would have removed themselves from that status. But it's an organization where other churches are very welcome to join and be part of and be members of. Of course, for the Conference of Churches in Grenada, it is very important that any constitution has a spiritual component. We would like to see that spirituality is taken care of in the Constitution, that that element of the human dignity is preserved. I know in the last meeting that we would have had in Tivoli, one of the topics that would have come up was the issue of gay rights. And it was a question that was posed to me. Now, it is a difficult subject to discuss, because while you want to ensure that human dignity is maintained, you still have to balance the rights of people. It is difficult as a conference to express a particular view, since the conference itself is made up of various denominations which may hold a position on the issue. So it is something that each and every denomination may need to give a position So I just wanted to let that be out there. Of course, you may be free to ask questions later on the issue. I may have a certain position, but other members may have a different position. The conference has been involved in this process. In the last process, it would have had several consultations with the conference to discuss several issues as we see them. We would like continuation of fundamental rights and freedoms of persons. We'd like that to be continued. The conference has partnered with the social partners, and so this issue of constitutional reform is one of the areas we would like to target and focus on when we meet with our social partners in May this year. One of the ways that the conference sees that it can promote constitutional reform is through its churches. We anticipate that the pulpit can be a way that persons in the community can know about the process, what is happening, where the meetings are being held, because you can have announcements in church as to the need for reform and the need for the involvement of the public, as this issue affects single one of us. The conference, as a body, will be meeting with its members. The conference really we have the executive members, and we will be doing outreach. We intend to do outreach within the communities to get a gauge of what people themselves see as issues, which we intend to bring before the advisory committee. Because as we see, that is one of the mandates that the Constitutional Reform Advisory Committee has placed on us, to raise all of the issues as we see them. Of course, there are some main issues which have already come up with the previous commissions that have been formed. But of course, there may be new issues that we see can be raised and become part of this process. Having said that, I think these are the contributions at this stage that I would like to make. Certainly that you can ask questions at the end of the session after the next speaker does his presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd just like to comment that the Conference of Churches, of course, is one of our, in terms of the constituent body, is very, very vocal. And when we started the process in 2010, between that time and 2013, it was one of the bodies that we had the most meetings with, because at that time there was a particular issue with the draft constitution then, and the preamble was written, which gave the impression that God was left out of the constitution. That was a very big issue with the Conference of Churches. We had to meet with them several times to discuss that. It is now my pleasure to introduce the next speaker, Mr. Tillman Thomas, former Prime Minister of Grenada, former Minister of Legal Affairs. He was the Prime Minister when I was invited to be part of this process. I don't think I've appeared publicly on this platform like this before with him, and I'd like to take the opportunity to thank him and his government then for that invitation and to become part of that process. When I started then, I'm not sure I was very excited, because constitutional reform wasn't very, it's always a very difficult issue, and we had just experienced what happened in St. Vincent, and the future looked bleak. But today, I can say that we've made several strides, and because of the progress that has been made, I'm extremely excited to be part of this process. And I'd like to thank you, sir, for that invitation to be part of that process. And as fate would have it, that I'm here with you tonight, sharing this platform to speak to the people of St. Patrick on this issue. So I invite you to make some remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Robert Branch, coordinator of the Constitution Review Committee. Honorable Clifton Paul, Member of Parliament for St. Patrick's East, Ms. Aisha John, representing the Conference of Churches, ladies, gentlemen, it is a pleasure for me to be part of this committee and to participate in this consultation. We are meeting at a very historic time in our country. 35 years ago, we were experiencing or going through a constitutional crisis. The Constitution was suspended 35 years ago. The Constitution, as was mentioned by Mr. Branch, and Mr. Branch touched on most of the major issues, but the Constitution as the supreme law of the land is a document that we as a people ought to be familiar with. The Constitution sets out the structure, the legal structure of how government operates and functions. The Constitution is a document where our rights and freedoms ought to be protected. Therefore, we ought to be part of that process as a people. And this is why I think it is important that we are here tonight. I'm somewhat disappointed that we didn't have more people here because this is an important activity. And we all are concerned about the rule of law, about justice, about governance. Because at the heart of a constitutional review is to bring about better governance. We want to welcome Dr. Alexis as he just arrived here. Yes, I was making the point that governance, that Mr. Branch mentioned the reviews that were done, and those were very prominent persons who were involved in those constitutional reviews. I mean, Sir Fred Phillip in 1985, Sir St. Paul and others in 2006, Professor McIntosh. And they made some very interesting recommendations. And we live in a changing world, and I think we have to make certain adjustments. Be thinking about cost efficiency. Today everybody talking about economic crisis and economic difficulties. Is there a more economical way, a cost-saving measure we could implement in terms of the governance of the country? And by this, we, as was mentioned, the whole system of unicameral or bicameral. Do we need two houses or one house? St. Vincent has a unicameral system. A bicameral system is very costly. For the House to meet and then for the Senate to meet, you have to prepare documents and people have to be there. And it is time-consuming and it is money is involved. If we have one house, when you have one meeting, everybody meets, it's less cost to the state. And these are some of the things that we need to consider, because that was one of the recommendations, that we would analyze this system of maintaining two houses and see if one house is not better in terms of cost, in terms of representation, because we cannot imitate everything that the British is doing. We have to look at our local situation and make certain adjustments. The issue of term limits. Should someone be permitted to serve more than 2 terms as Prime Minister? Term limits is something that we as a people should look at, because at the end of the day, the Constitution must reflect, the sentiments of the people, and we want, as I say, governance. We must get the maximum benefit as a people from a system of governance that that is participatory, that is democratic, and that we are comfortable with. So the issue of term limits is something that also was recommended. We know several countries have term limits in terms of the head of government. So this is something that we as a people need to look at. The issue of setting a specific date for election. Should it be up to the Prime Minister to call an election at any time whenever he feels? Or should there be a set date? So we know that, look, every 5 years at a certain time, there's going to be a general election so that the necessary preparation could be made and that the necessary systems could be put in place so that an election will be held at that particular date. These are some of the things that that we need to to consider. Again, should members of the Senate, should they be elected, or should they continue to that they be appointed? This is all these issues that, in terms of representation, if we want, in some countries, of course, we don't have a presidential system, but it's possible to have a system where senators are elected instead of being appointed. Again, all these are issues that we need to take into consideration, because we should have an input in the constitution of our country. And as I mentioned before, that when this constitution was written, there was not that debate or discussion. Now I think we have an opportunity to see how we could look at all the recommendations that were made by these various commissions and to cement some of these recommendations, because I believe that we have to look at the changing world that we are living in, and it is important that we get involved in the process through this sort of a consultation. Again, I say it is not. These are recommendations. I mean, it could be debated and discussed, but I think at the end of the day, we have to, the issue of cost, the issue of representation, the issue of recall. There are those who believe we should have a system in place to recall MPs if they don't perform properly. If you could identify sufficient reasons or put some structures in place so that if an MP is not living up to expectation, the constituency should be given an opportunity to put a structure in place to have a recall. All these are issues that you need to give consideration. So, ladies and gentlemen, I think it is a very important activity. I think after 35 years, I think there's a need for us to look at our constitution and see where there are shortcomings and where we could make changes that are beneficial to us as a people. Mr. Branch mentioned the issue of proportional representation. I mean, proportional representation, I believe, is something that is good. It shows it reflects the democratic nature of the society better than the first past the post. Because here we have 40% of the vote. We got 40% of the vote. And we have no representation in the parliament. Whereas if you have a system whereby you look at the percentage, if seats are located according to the percentage of votes, we will have and that is better for the body politic. You see, these are the things that we have to look at what is good for the country and how we could advance the cause of the society in a way that is harmonious, democratic, and with respect for each other. So these are issues that we need to give consideration. I think that the whole issue of proportional representation is an issue that needs serious consideration by the country, because we want good governance. When you have no checks and balances, the whole question of governance, is been threatened. There's no doubt about it. But if you have a proportional representation system, there's always going to be guaranteed there will be somebody to overlook and to question those who are, administering of the state. So I'll stop here, and I want to encourage you that you should get involved in the process and get people to be more concerned about the whole issue of our constitution in Grenada, Carriacou, and St.Patrick. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Thomas. It's getting late, and I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Francis Alexis, who is the chairman of the Constitution Reform Advisory Committee, former Attorney General of Grenada, and recognized expert on constitutional law, not only in Grenada, but in the region. He's a former lecturer in law at the University of the West Indies. As I always mention, you couldn't go to the University of the West Indies and do law and not have heard of Dr. Alexis or read one of his books. He's one of the leading authorities in the region, and definitely grateful to have his wise counsel on this process and that he could make it here tonight. He's just coming from another consultation in St. George's, so I'd like to welcome you, Dr. Francis Alexis, and to have a few remarks from you. And interestingly, he's here to handle all the difficult questions that you have afterwards.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Branch. Colleague members of the head table, ladies and gentlemen all, Member of Parliament for the area, we are pleased to have you, sir. As Mr. Branch told you, I'm coming from another consultation in the St. George's City, and I hustled here, and I was called by Senator Steele and told by him he's on his way up, he's just leaving the ministry. We're grateful to all of you turning out here this evening to share with us on the matter of constitution reform. As you have heard, we're not coming here with a clean slate. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel. The baton has passed to us literally, coming down from the Fred Phillips Constitution Review Commission, the Mr. Justice Lyle St. Paul Constitution Commission, and Professor McIntosh with his draft. From what former Prime Minister Tillman Thomas told you and what I heard, it is evident that a number of issues have been raised with you. And in case you think that some of the things Mr. Thomas was speaking about were just academic stuff, it's not true. All is provided for in the Constitution of Belize. They amended the Constitution to provide for that. In Dominica, the Constitution provides for electing the senators instead of appointing them, so they have an option. Term limits, they have term limits in Guyana by a constitution amendment. They have term limits in Belize by a constitution amendment. So these are issues which are being discussed in a very practical way across the region. And why is this so? This is so because of two main reasons. One, if a constitution does not resonate with the people, meaning if a people don't feel attached to the constitution, they are not, to that extent, motivated to produce. They are not, to that extent, motivated to take part in the process of governance. That is why you find across the world, nations are trying to reform the Constitution to make the people feel more connected to the Constitution, because that way people are more encouraged to give up their best to nation building. When a Grenadian wins the Olympic, that is not a matter of investing directly, but it attracts the people of the country to the nation. They feel proud. So they name streets after him. They name tongues after them. That produces pride in nation building. And constitution reform is one of those vehicles for producing pride in nation building. Secondly, in a more material sense, even people inside the country, but most of people outside the country, they don't go investing in a country when they feel that their resources are not protected, when they feel that what they invest in the country is not well looked after, and when they feel that the people in that country are not motivated into working, into making the investment productive. That is why constitution reform is not a pie-in-the-sky thing. It's a down-to-earth exercise aimed at releasing the energies of the people so that they feel more a part of the nation, and that way they conduct themselves more, not only with pride, but with contentment, with drive. I picked up from what Mr. Thomas said, that Mr. Branch reminded you about the circumstances in which our independence constitution was proclaimed. The night we raised the flag, the leadership had to retreat to Fort George. And it was darkness where they were raising the flag. They had to park vehicles to give them light because there was a strike on. The electricity workers were on strike. Where you ever hear that? That's a first. A flag raising is done Independence Night in the full blare of everybody to see. Well, most everybody anyhow. Whoever wishes to see. But when you do it the way it was done, and the way the Constitution was drafted, you lack a sense of participation, you lack a sense of belonging to the Constitution, and what we are trying to do now is to correct that. It's almost like, in a sense, start over again. This time doing it in the way that whoever Grenada wishes to take part and to launch it will be there. That is why we are as we are. From the trade union movement, Conference of Churches, Association of Evangelical Churches, developmental organizations, the Grenada Bar Association, the OECS Bar Association, Carriacou and Petit Martinique Movement, the National Democratic Congress, Mr. Thomas here representing the party at this committee, the New National Party, represented at the committee by Senator Steele. We are an all-embracing, far-flung committee. We're not a committee of the government of Grenada. This is not a political partisan operation. It is a people's movement here. And you are seeing the Constitution being revised from different vantage points. Now, I heard Mr. Thomas telling you about proportional representation. And where I've come from tonight down in the city, they asked me, what is proportional representation? Now, that gathering there tonight in the city is a very interesting gathering. In a sense, they're recalling March 13th. So you have there tonight former revolutionaries of the far left, the middle left, all kinds of people down there tonight. But they were asking me, what is representation? You don't have to ask me because I heard Mr. Thomas explain it for you. Namely, if you get, say, 40% of the votes cast in the general election, equally you get 40% of the seats reserved for proportional representation. Meaning, we are considering continuing with our 15 seats elected on the first past the post system we born into and grew up with. Not interfering with that. Your parliamentary representative will continue to be a parliamentary representative. But we're thinking, additional to the 15 seats now, you might have, say, 5 or 7 seats reserved for the proportional representation members of parliament. So we take the same number of votes you cast in the election, we take them. The electoral people look to see what percentage the NDC got, if 20%, 40%, and of the 5 or so same seats reserved for proportional representation members of parliament, the NDC now gets the percentage of those 5 or so 7 seats corresponding with the votes they got in the general election. What does that mean? It means that you will always have opposition members of parliament. So, in the budget debate, the Minister of Finance will not be debating with himself. The Prime Minister will not be debating with himself, an exercise I'm sure he doesn't enjoy. You will always have a leader of the opposition, which is what a parliament is about. Proposing and opposing. And I was at Cable over the weekend, reading some of the old books, recharging. And Sir Ivor Jennings, in one of his books called Cabinet Government, has a fine sentence. He said, the opposition has a duty to oppose. Very neatly put. The opposition has a duty to oppose. Meaning, in the parliament, if you have a one-sided affair, all NNPs or all NDCs, what profit does that bring to the country? You don't have alternative views. You have alternative views. The question arises, somebody asked me tonight in the city, are we going to break away from the Queen? Isn't it time that we break away from the Queen? You, the people, have to decide that issue. It is not for us. We will, of course, advise the government, and the government will decide at their level. But you, the people, have to decide. Well, how will you decide? We think it is not a good idea to present you with one single bill with all of these ideas put into it. Because some of you might like getting out of the Privy Council, getting into our own Caribbean Court of Justice, and you want to vote for that. Some of you might not like the idea of remaining with 2 houses of parliament, and you want to vote for a parliament comprising 1 house, for the reasons I heard Mr. Thomas giving you. So we think if we give you about 7 bills, one, for example, on the question of moving out of the Privy Council into the Caribbean Court of Justice, so you have that single bill by itself. You have another bill asking you, Do you want to get out of the British monarchy and have your own local president as head of state, as they have in Dominica, in Trinidad and Tobago, in Guyana? You can answer that on your single bill there. And so you have, as they will say nowadays, a menu of bills, and you can pick and choose. Because if we give you one single bill, some of it you might like, some of it you might not like. And if we give it to you pecamel like that, it might not be the best thing. So we are listening to you, we are reporting to you what has happened before. We have a website, I'm sure you've been told, and we have selected all the recommendations made so far, all of them. So you can go onto the website and see what the committee in 1985 thought, what the commission in 2006 thought, what Professor McIntosh thought, and you can choose. And next time you see us, you can tell us you like the idea of a parliament having one house, you like the idea of moving out of the Privy Council into our own Caribbean Court of Justice because that promotes self-respect, self-dignity. It gives easier access to your final court. Where the Privy Council is there, not many of us can take up cases to the final court, but where it is in Trinidad, we can get our cases to the final court, whatever it is. We want to emphasize we don't come to you with a finished product. We have come to share, to tell you what we think, to hear from you what you think, and to advise the government. As I see it as it stands now, we have a golden opportunity to fashion a constitution after our own image and likeness. The major parties are on board, the NDC, the NNP, the people's organizations, the trade union movements, they are on board. What we have to do is to capture the imagination of the moment and run with it so we can be sure we pass on to posterity something that we created across Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique. And we urge you to step forward, let your voices be heard, take part in the referendum, be a part of the history to come. Thank you very much indeed.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Alexis. And now the floor is open for any questions that a member audience would have regarding the presentations that were made.
That the Constitution is for the people. It's about the people. My question is, can the language of the Constitution be more that of the language of the people? In other words, can it be more palatable? Nobody falls asleep in Grenada reading the Constitution. One of the reasons might be the language might not be so enticing to read for a layman. I am asking if consideration can be given to making it more the layman's language, because it's for the people. Thank you.
In answering you, Mr. Andel, I want to take the opportunity to say thanks very much to you for helping organize this consultation. We appreciate that very much indeed. Thank you. I was asked to be the drafts person for the new constitution. Senator Steele, give a warm welcome, everybody, representing the NSC. And I said, I'm not going to myself and try to draft a constitution. And you can do that on a computer nowadays. Anybody can do that. But I said to the government, no, I need a committee to work with and to advise me. And one of the reasons is that a lawyer writing a constitution tends to write legal language, legalese. And everything he or she writes, he or she needs to run it past other lawyers too, but people who are not lawyers, so that they can say to him or her, this thing you've written there, that's too technical for me, I can't understand that. Can you break it down? Happily, the government agreed. And we have a constitution drafting advisory committee. So when we get to the stage of drafting now, it wouldn't be one person sitting down and telling himself or herself, that sounds nice, that sounds good. No, you will have the committee looking at everything that is drafted and giving an input, doing our best to make sure it is written in such a way that, as we will say, most everybody can understand it. At the same time, though, a constitution cannot be written as a newspaper. It has to have a certain style and panache and a flair about it. So the magic is to find a happy midway between, on the one hand, newspaperese, so to speak, and on the other hand, too much legalese. And we hope we will be able to do that.
I want to go back to the proportional representation. You did say, Dr. Alexis, that we're going to work with the 15, and we're going to take the number of votes. Now, let's use the current situation. One party got the 15. Proportional representation. How are you going to split that?
No, we're not interfering. You will have two kinds of membership of parliament, apart from the senators. Two kinds. One, you may call them the constituency representatives. There are 15, they will not be interfered with. Secondly, you will have the proportional representation members of parliament. If, say, you have 5 proportional representation members, we can take the votes cast in the last general election. Mr. Thomas said his party got 40%. So, of the 5 PR members, his party will get 40% of those 5. So just to repeat, the constituency representatives, the 15 of them, will not be interfered with at all. At the next election again, similarly, you are electing whether 15, 17 constituency representatives. At the close of the poll, when all the dust is settled, the electoral authorities will look to see what percentage each party got of the votes cast. And they will then allocate the PR members of parliament acting to the percentage of votes polled by each party, or for that matter, independents.
15 would remain.
Yes.
But out of that 15, you're going to take the PRs.
No, out of the votes cast, you will get the PR members. An additional 5. Those 15 are over there. You have 5 over here now. And we are allocating these 5 over here. And we're doing that on the PR basis.
Okay, so that 5, you divide them as the examples. 60,
Yes.
40.
Yes.
Oh, you see, okay.
Yes.
And you'll have one house.
What is your thinking on it? Should we
No,
have one
I
or
want to
two?
know proportional representation if it's going to have one house.
It would make a difference because If you have two houses, the PR members will be members of the elected house. If you have one house, it wouldn't make a difference either. You will have the constituency representatives, the PR members, and the senators, all in one house.
Oh, so you're still going to have senators?
Oh, yes, you will have senators.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. My next question has to do with the Carriacou section. Mr. Branch alluded to that earlier. You said that they have been clamoring for some things quite a while now. What difference would it make if you change Grenada name now to say Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit-Matic? I wouldn't support that in the first place. But what change would that create for the people of Carriacou? It's just a name change. Is it going to cause something else to happen in Carriacou and Petit-Matic? Are they going to have something else taking place?
I'll give the question to Senator Steele.
Okay, good evening. Apologies, first of all, for my late arrival. I had a late finishing meeting in town, but I got here as quickly as I could. But to pick up on your question about Carriacou, what if you were to ask the people of Carriacou and Petit-Matic what it will mean to them? It is significant. It is very significant. You personally may not appreciate that, but you speak to every Carriacou and every Petit-Matican, they would be able to express very clearly. And as somebody who is from Carriacou, it signifies a recognition of the value, the contribution that Carriacou and Petit-Matic makes to the state of Grenada. The same way you have Barbuda to Antigua, Tobago, to Trinidad, Nevis, to St. Kitts, etc. It may not be something that you can quantify in financial terms, but certainly in terms of a feeling of national mission. It's a soft thing, but it's a soft thing that is a very important thing. And every Carriacou and every Petit-Matican will be able to speak passionately about what it will mean, that recognition to them, and that recognition on the passport. As I said, there is no, you may argue there is no economic value, but in terms of identity, in terms of defining us as a nation, it has significant importance.
Going to go ahead as normal. It's just only
No,
the people of Carriacou getting that kind of personal attachment or personal satisfaction. But nothing else is going to change. The government is going to remain the same.
It's
no
not
new administration in Carriacou, nothing.
No, well, it's within the context of local government, because that is also something that is currently on the statutes. I think that will be the former administration put certain measures in place to progress the development, the establishment of local government in Carriacou and Petit-Matic, and this new National Party administration will be doing exactly the same, will complete that piece of work. So when you look at the passport change within the context of the establishment of local government in Carriacou and Petit-Matic, as I said, it brings additional meaning to it. It's not talking about independence, it's not talking about breakaway state, but as I said, it's just recognizing the unique characteristics of those two islands, the contribution that they make, and some of the special needs that they have. There are components that are very unique to both Petit-Matic and to Carriacou. And it just establishes that, and it's in a very formal, a very mature way. And as we reach, we've reached our 40th anniversary of independence. And, it's seen, this whole process, the process of reviewing the Constitution as a whole, going out to the nation, getting the feedback of every voting person in Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique as to what they think about the Constitution, those laws that govern us. Okay. It's a very timely and fitting thing.
All right. I don't think my question was answered, what I was looking for. I'm getting it. Anyway, let's move on.
No, no.
There are several issues involved. One, recognition that Carriacou and Petit Martinique are part of the Tri-Island state, and making our brothers and sisters in Carriacou and Petit Martinique feel appreciated, and I will support that fully. That is why you will find across the Caribbean, where a state comprises more than one island or country, the other islands are named St. Kitts and Nevis. And in fact, in Nevis, what you have in St. Kitts and Nevis is a federation. Trinidad and Tobago. St. Vincent was not always St. Vincent and the Grenadines. It is only when they became independent that officially they became St. Vincent and the Grenadines. It was only St. Vincent. Some nations changed their names completely. There's a nation called Sri Lanka. Even after independence, it was Ceylon. I always remember growing up as a little boy, I would say, I would like to go and live in Ceylon. There must be a nice Ceylon mango there, but then they changed it to Sri Lanka. There's a nation called Myanmar. It was only about, not more than 10 years ago they changed the name of the state. It wasn't Myanmar all the time. I can't remember the original name. Burma. It was Burma. Even today, some people still call it Burma, but its proper name is Myanmar. So there's nothing wrong or even peculiar in a name change. And in this case, the name change is more than justified. Bet you if they had oil in Carriacou, Petit Martinique, we would have rushed to change the name a long time ago. That's a big fight going on in Scotland now. Scotland wants to secede from the United Kingdom because they have a lot of oil around Scotland. And the Scottish people are saying, we want to decide our own destiny. Well, we don't know how the referendum will go, but it is being discussed. So let us see it in this big-hearted way, and not only in terms of dollars and cents. No, it is not going to change the Parliament of Grenada. No, it is not going to change the Cabinet of Grenada. It is certainly not going to change the court system. But for the very reason we are talking about reforming the Constitution, we should be thinking about calling the state Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique, meaning it will release the energies of the people of Carriacou and Petit Martinique, make them contribute more to nation building, make them feel more a part of the state than they feel now. So I urge you to support the name change to Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique.
The only thing I could conclude is that the satisfaction they're going to get with the name change. So everything else is going to remain the same.
Yes.
Right. That's what I wanted to focus on. I find this name too long. When somebody asks me, where are you from? I'm from Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique. I'm from 3 islands. The present constitution already established that Carriacou is part of the whole thing. When you say Grenada, the state of Grenada, as a matter of fact, I think that's written there. It includes the mainland here, Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique. So that is already established. So what you're telling me now, this constitution made a mistake. So we wreck it. In terms of name, I find the name is too long. That's my number one problem with it.
You know, let me tell you something.
I accept Carriacou and Petit Martinique, but I find the name change too long.
Do you know the name of the United Kingdom? The proper name of the United Kingdom is the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland. That's Northern Ireland now. The United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland.
So is that what's written on the British passport, or you just mark British passport over? What is written there?
I can't answer that. I don't know. In any event, the proper name of the United States of America is the United States of America. But who says that? Everybody says USA, US.
Okay, my next question. Yeah, we are here to discuss. I'm not going to take all the time.
Sure.
Mr. Thomas, only behind this support me, yeah? Too long. Mr. Thomas did mention about cameral.
You too long.
Cameral and bicameral, whatnot.
Yeah.
Please, can you give some extension of that? Tell us exactly what it is and how much house and how decision making inside there.
Instead of having two houses,
And that's
no, that's a unicameral. Yeah, one house. Everybody, senators and MPs sit in one house. So you have one meeting. When you have a meeting of the assembly, everybody sits at one meeting. There wouldn't be any need for a speaker of the house and a president of the senate. You have one president of the assembly. Oh, generally, the official opening. Well, generally, yes. You have that's a formality. After every new sitting, everybody, senators and MPs sit together. But this would be a permanent feature of the system, an assembly. You know, I know Dr. Alexis may want to amplify on it.
A bicameral parliament is a parliament that has two houses or two chambers. Usually, one house is elected and the other house is nominated, usually. A unicameral parliament, on the other hand, has one single chamber. And in that one house or chamber, you may have three different kinds of membership. You have, for example, the constituency representatives, the senators, and you have what you may call ex officio members, the Attorney General, for example, usually. And even the Speaker can be a different kind of member. He may not, or she may not necessarily be an elected member. The Constitution allows for you to have what might be called a speaker from the outside. What are the advantages and disadvantages? If you have a bicameral house, two houses, bicameral parliament, once in a while, a great while too, the elected house might send up a bill to the Senate, and the Senate might pick up a mistake. Once in a long while, that might happen. On the other hand, in the unicameral parliament, you're saving money. You don't have to reprint the whole same bill over for the two houses. We're going to learn better from each experiences. Members of the Senate will learn from the elected members and so on. If you go to the Senate when it is sitting, if you find any member of the public there, 1, 2, 3, you find a lot. Most people don't go, not out of disrespect for Senator Steele, not at all. You heard him speak just now. He speaks very well, authoritatively. But and it makes sense too, because the people who sit in the Senate, they were not elected, they were not chosen by the people to represent them. They come from interest groups, the Chamber of Commerce, the trade union movement, the farmers, some of them, and so on. So it only makes sense that the general populace will say, I'm not bothering with the Senate. Who are they? They come in through the back door, in that manner of speaking. Whereas if senators are sitting in the same assembly with the elected representatives, the senators are bringing all their skills. It may be skills on the economy. It may be skills on farming. It may be skills on human relations. And the whole nation is going to profit more from having all of them sit in one chamber and all bringing to bear their various experiences and expertise. That is why you have a unicameral parliament in St. Vincent next door, in Guyana, in St. Kitts, and it's functioning real nice. And come to vote, I will vote for a unicameral parliament so I can go to the chamber, elected members, hear the PR members, hear the senators. It will be a richer debate. That's the way I see it. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Let me say a special welcome to St. Patrick's.
Thank you.
Being the historical parish, of course, on a very historical day. March 13th, we all know what happened. And I must say that I was proudly associated with March 13th. I just wanted to make that clear. My name is Justin Well. Regarding the Queen as head of state, if we were to break away from that, what do Grenada stand to lose, be it in whatever way, be it financially or materially, in whatever way? Do we stand to lose anything, first of all?
We stand to lose absolutely nothing, financially or otherwise. The United Kingdom contributes precious little to the economy of Grenada. Precious little. Before Britain went into the common market, the European common market, in the good old days of the 60s, when you see the banana trucks going down to St. George's, overladen, money coming in, we were shipping bananas to England, to the United Kingdom. Since Britain has gone into the United Kingdom and it's going deeper and deeper into Europe, the deeper it goes into Europe, the further it goes away from us. Admittedly, we don't spend any money on keeping the Queen, that is true. We don't give her any money. But we will not lose anything. If anything, it seems to me, we stand to gain financially. Because more and more countries are becoming republics. The United States is a republic. Trinidad and Tobago is a republic. Dominique is a republic. I know, growing up in Grenada in the 60s, we believed that a republic was a place. If a man hits you, you just pull out your gun and you shoot him. That's what we thought in the 60s. Yeah, if I feel like you do growing up in the 60s, you say, man, if I was in a republic, man, you know what I do? But that's not what a republic is about at all. And some countries, we just had some relationships with Venezuela. Now that Chavez is not there, we appreciate better that the oil deal we had with Venezuela, we still have, is a good thing. And so some of these countries have a difficulty understanding how we can be saying that we're independent, but still have the Queen as our head of state. I think it affects us. It affects us. It affects our ability to access development aid and loan. I can't You can't prove these things with the accuracy of mathematics, but you can get a good sense of what is going on. In any event, my brother, it is not going to cost us anything financially. That is the bottom line. Having said that, let me quickly add, all the years I've been in the law, going back, I've been teaching law since 1973 at the university level. I have passionately advocated moving away from the Queen. But in the function I perform now, it is not my business to try to foist my personal belief on anybody. Therefore, for me, maybe to some extent this thing about moving away from the Queen could be a distraction. Maybe. But if there's a movement for it, all the merrier for me. That's how it is.
You of the CCJ, right? Am I to believe, right, that let's say we ought to break away from the Queen of the Head of State, quite obviously, we wouldn't have to go to England. We don't have to use England as our final court of appeal. So then we're left with no choice now. Would that be the case?
Not at all. Trinidad and Tobago is a republic. The Queen is not the head of state of Trinidad and Tobago, but they still send appeals to the Privy Council. So it can be done. To me, it is inconsistent to be not having the Queen as your head of state, but still continuing to send appeals to the Privy Council. It doesn't make sense to me. However, it only goes to show in the world, in the real world, you have compromises and you have to cut and adjust and so on. But let me quickly add, this time, I am a passionate advocate of moving away from the Privy Council. And that I will champion in the referendum debate. Because you can't be being independent. And every little legal dispute you have, you send it back to Britain. Doesn't make sense. Furthermore, when you look at the way the Privy Council decides some cases, to me, they are damaging our psyche. The things they say about our judges and our people. When they are sitting in the Privy Council, to me they say anything. When they are sitting as the United Kingdom Supreme Court, formerly the House of Lords, they sit in a very upright way, and they speak properly, and they speak very carefully. But when they're sitting in the Privy Council, man, they just say anything. And that makes sense, because if you continue to send your appeals to the Privy Council, why should we bother too much about you? Some of the more serious constitutional cases, when you look at the summary way in which the Privy Council decide these cases, you know they don't have much time for us. As a matter of fact, in the year 2008, the president of the Privy Council said openly in public, it's time for these countries to have their own final court and get out of the Privy Council. They actually said, look at a case from the, I told you I was at Cable over the weekend. And they are now putting in the Privy Council people who are not even serious big judges. And that is a follow-up on what the president of the Privy Council said in 2008. Get your own final court. Stop coming here. We're going to pack the Privy Council now with very junior judges. And they have started doing it. What somebody who used to be with me at Cambridge, he is now sitting on the Privy Council. Not a senior judge in Britain, not a senior judge anywhere, and another person I see they have on the Privy Council there. That's disrespect for us. They don't take us seriously.
Okay, my final comments actually. Well, I feel very strong about 2 terms for a prime minister. I'm very, very strong on that because we know what absolute power does. Corrupts absolutely, and all sort of abuse in all different forms result. Also, specific date for election. This thing about people holding dates to the chest, I don't think that's, so that's the next thing I feel very strong about. And I as well, again, I will support proportional representation in the parliament. Anybody else?
Well, thank you very much indeed.
My name is Victor Philip. I'm happy to be here and to be part of these things. I'm just sorry that more people is not here. If I recall earlier on, the question was asked about making the Constitution more layman-like so that we can understand. And Dr. Francis tried to answer it, but somehow I beg to differ. I personally think, in my opinion, and I say my opinion, I think most of these things are kept or held in this way so that lawyers themselves can continue making the money, right? So that if I could understand an educator and I could understand a layman term, I could probably take my look at my case for myself, and then the lawyer probably will be sidetracking. Now, my concern is, and I'm coming to my point, is the same thing. I think this is one of the reasons that we don't have people here. Because the question to people is not interested. What is a constitution? Because even if you tell them that a constitution is something that governs you, that gives you the right, you know your right and whatever, what do I care about it? I can't understand this thing, right? Even too, I think our country is not taking the right approach to make people be patriots of the country. And I think the Constitution is one idea, one thing that I think that the Constitution should be taught as part of the curriculum. And I can't see how you want people to be a part of his country if he's not, trained into the ways that he's supposed to be part of his country. I think since growing up, just as how your parents train you, this is right and this is wrong, I think the Constitution should be embedded in something like that. So we start in whatever way, how we get it simple from primary school, we up with it in secondary school, and even when you're doing in college, I think one of the electives or something, people should do that. So in that way, people knows the right. Okay, you know your right, you know what you're subjected to if you do this or if you don't do that, right? And then people would have a more love for country. I think people tend to, and this is just for the politician and leader for the politician to fight. And I think we need to get away from that. So I think we need to make our constitution more interested. You say that you're here because you want it to be inclusive. Well, I think a way of being inclusive is by teaching it in school. I think it's a right, just as how we learn our pledge and whatever, we should know our constitution in that way. Okay?
I agree.
I have a question coming from somebody. They want to find out if there would be more of that consultation within St. Patrick's.
Aren't you going to have more consultation?
Definitely. We will be having more consultations. We're going to have consultations throughout of Grenada until the end of the year at least, and we'll be coming back to St. Patrick's. We'll be going to other areas, Hermitage and Shantimel, all these different areas we're going to be having consultations. And if you invite us back here again, we'll be back.
Okay. I would like to make a point too. I think I will call on the major political parties in Grenada to try and how let us fight hard to win the election. Try and fight and get the members to come to those things. I think it is important. Because how it is already, you see that we already becomes a two-party state. I think we need to bring people out, not only for the confusion of yellow and green, but for the Constitution, so that, for the fact that they could know what the Constitution is all about and be part of that. Okay? I want to ask a question though.
Well, could I just comment? Let me just comment on that. And it may have been stated at the beginning, but it's important to note that this thing is not about party politics. This isn't about green or yellow. The whole process of reforming the Constitution, I mean, it started back in 1984, whether in opposition, whether in government, both parties have been working towards what we're working towards now. And we do have a responsibility as politicians to ensure that we keep the politics out of this. This isn't, as I said, about party politics. This is about the country, it's about the nation. It is about taking a look at those laws that were written for us prior to independence in 1974. And the first time as an independent nation, as proud Grenadians, Caracoons, and Petit Martinicans, to take a look at, as I said, that structure that governs everything, the absolute laws of our country. And that is something that we all need to understand just how significant those words, as difficult as they may be in this little book, but how fundamental they are to everything that goes on within this country. And, you know, the opportunity to review that and make the necessary changes. So, as I said, speaking as a politician, I mean, having Mr. Thomas here, the committee that's been set up to manage this process is across parties, it's across all sectors of our country's operations. So politics, colors of party, nothing to do with this at all.
I think what I probably I didn't bring it forward. What I'm saying is, I'm not saying that. I agree with you. We don't want to be part of politics. But what I'm saying is that the politicians themselves, this is a duty. This should be their duty to try to let people understand and to get to know the Constitution. And what I'm saying is that they should have all forums to try to explain to the people why it is important to understand and to know your Constitution. And by so doing, encourage them to come to forums like that. So I don't know if you get me right.
Yeah, no. And that is what we are attempting to do. Clearly tonight, maybe more could have been done, but we have a lot of effort is being put into these consultations. And as the year rolls out, you know, we want to ensure that there is no person in Grenada, Carriacou, or Petit Martinique who is unaware of the importance of the work that's going on, the Constitution, and this whole activity. That is what we're trying to amend.
Okay, thank you. Well, just going back, Dr. Alexis, I'm glad and I'm happy. I agree with a lot of your points. The fact about being on your own, getting away from England, and whatever. But still in your speaking and talking about the writing of the Constitution, I still see you're hanging on too, because most of the language is actually come from them. So you still want to hang on to England. It's just like we have independence. We say we're independent, but we still have the Queen. So when you're talking about let go, I think we should let go out and let us understand, you know what I mean? So thank you very much.